For today's project, I'm going to be making a sign for my friend's daughter who's having a baby. So this will be for the nursery. So I have a lot of this thin plywood left over from when I did my kitchen cabinets. So I cut a piece out of that. This is, I think it's 9 by 14. And then I bought some wooden tomato stakes at the Dollar General, and I'm going to use these to frame it out. So I've cut these edges here, and I haven't cut the other ones yet because I want to paint this first. And I'm going to use Waverly chalk paint in the ink for these side pieces. And then for the board, I'm going to use a Waverly white. So I'm going to get that started. Got my board all painted, and I painted both sides. Even though you're only going to see one side, I just think it looks nicer. And then I got my top and bottom borders painted, but I haven't put them on yet because I want to put my graphics on first and my stencils, because it'll be a lot easier than having to deal with having to put my hand over top of that. I want it to look nice. First, I'm going to put open up my Cricut design space, and I click new, and first off I'm going to go to shapes, and I'm going to add a square, and this square is going to be the size of my entire board, which is 9.5, and I have to unlock that or else it'll just make a 9.5 square. And the height is 14 inches. Okay, so there's my first square. Then I'm going to put another square, go to shapes again. This one is going to be a white square. And this square is going to be what will be left of the white once you put the border on. So my border is 3/4 of an inch, so I'm going to do 8.75, which would be 8 3/4, unlock, and the height will be 13.25, which would be 13 1/4. So there is my project. All right, so I'm going to click on all that, and I'm going to group them together so that they stay together. Then I'm going to add a text box, and I'm going to type in the first line, and then I'm going to come up to my fonts. I'm going to go to System, and then I'm going to go through my fonts there to see which one I like. That way it'll change it at will. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see this whole project. And it's a pain. But anyways, so I decided to do different fonts for each line. The next line would be child. And then I find a font that I want. I love the angel face font. I just think it looks so pretty. And then I'm going to bring it down. Okay. Once you figure out what you want your text to say, then you're going to move this stuff over, because if you try to put it all together, it's just going to move the boxes. You're going to put the arrow all the way around everything, and then you're going to group it together when you get it where you want it. And then that's going to be my cut for my matte vinyl. And then I'm going to, for the top and the bottom, I'm going to put some leaves because she's doing like a woodland theme. So I'm going to put some leaves on the top and leaves on the bottom, but I'm going to stencil those. So I'm going to have to do those in a different cut. So for that, I had to upload images. And the images that I found I found on clipart-library.com. This website here. And I just typed in leaf, clip art, and it brought up all these different leaves. And I found the ones I wanted, really simple. So you just click on the one you want. And then it'll prompt you to download. And once you download it, you go into your files. Go to downloads. And then you'll find them. See, I downloaded mine yesterday. And then you just upload them from there into your Cricut design space, which I've already done. This will be my first mat. This will be in vinyl. And my second will be in the stencil. Let me see here. The Cricut stencil vinyl. I have never used this stuff, so I'm hoping it's going to work out all right. I'll probably use these leaves again. That's why I'm using the stencil. And I think the paint will look nicer, and I can do a more variated color. So for the first one, we're going to click continue. Hopefully, yes, my Cricut's on. And I'm going to click on my matte vinyl. And then I'm going to click, oh, I gotta load my mat. I haven't loaded my mat yet. So, okay. While that's cutting, I forgot to mention that with your fonts, some of your fonts, like for this, on this font, it would have cut each letter individually. So when I put my box over top of it and attached it, I also welded it, which made it one solid piece for each word. So make sure you check your fonts. It's just safe to just weld it just to be on the safe side. But once you weld it, you cannot undo it. So make sure it's exactly how you want it and then go ahead and weld it. Now for my stencil cutout, I had to change the colors of my leaf so that it would cut on a different mat because it's not the same. I want to do the stencil cut, so the pressures have to be different. So we're going to cut that. For some reason it's being weird. Now, according to the directions, you have to set your machine for a special material. So you go to Browse Materials, and I'm going to type in stencil. Search. And they've only got 3 options for the Cricut Maker. So I'm going to go to stencil vinyl and done. And then for my pressure, I'm going to go to less. Hopefully this works. I've already got my mat loaded with my vinyl, and she's already flashing. She's ready to go. So let's see how that turns out. That turned out, but I don't know if you can see that, but because the font was so fine, it kind of took up the scripture, so I may have to redo that. But I'm going to weed this out while I'm waiting for my leaves to be cut out. Well, I've weeded out, and the scripture did exactly what I thought. It's a beautiful font, but it just is too delicate for this kind of print. Maybe if I would have made it bigger, it would have helped, but I'm going to have to redo that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut as close around as I can so that I can get an accurate placement on my board. So I'm going to do that. For the stencil, you want to do the opposite of the vinyl. You want to take out the main pieces so that when you put the stencil down, it leaves what you want on it. So I got my transfer tape on. I hate transfer tape because it never goes on the way I want it to. I got my little rubber spatula, and I'm trying to press it in there as good as I can to make sure that it's going to stick. Hopefully not too good. And then I'm going to reverse it and peel the white off the back, and that will have our design on it. So now I've got it on my board, and I'm going to flip it over and figure out whereabouts I want it. I kind of want it in the center, but I want enough room on top and bottom to put some nice pretty leaves on there. I think that looks pretty good. Then I'm going to slap her on there. Nice, good. I like to go over it with my finger as I'm peeling, just to make sure it's gonna come off, and it's not. There she goes. Sometimes it's best if you go at an angle and then kind of smooth it as you go. And you can go nice and slow because you can see it's gonna stick to the transfer tape and not on the project. So you gotta be very patient, which I lack in that department. So this is why I hate this part. I ended up redoing the child word because it didn't look right. And I had to print off the scripture anyways. For these dots, I printed them separately and just placed them on there because if you tried to do it with the font that was on there, for some reason they disappear. So I just did it that way. And I put my stencils on there in a couple random spots so I can try that out. The crisp green and the spring green. And then I've got this stuff here, this Waverly chalk paint in green. It's called, I have no idea how to even say that. So we're going to try that and kind of layer it and see how that looks. And hopefully it'll turn out okay. I'm pretty impressed with the stencil stuff. It's pretty tough. So because when I peeled this off, some of these stuck to each other and it peeled right apart pretty easy. So it's pretty cool stuff. So we'll see how it works. I'm going to make sure I push down the edges real good so that it don't get any bleed through. I got some of the stenciling done and I'm pretty happy with it. The only thing I didn't think about is when I cut out around my stencil, I should have left more room to do the stenciling. But other than that, it's turning out pretty good. I'm just making sure that when I use my stencil brush, I try to get a lot of that paint off. And when I position it, I make sure that I have pushed it down pretty good so that it doesn't bleed through. And so far it hasn't. The only thing it's done is bled through on the sides, like here a little bit, but that's going to get covered up by the trim anyways. It's turning out pretty good. I'm just making sure that when I use my stencil brush, I try to get a lot of that paint off. And when I position it, I make sure that I have pushed it down pretty good so that it doesn't bleed through. And so far it hasn't. The only thing it's done is bled through on the side of the stuff. I think it's looking pretty darn good. I think it's turned out cute. Before I take this out to the shed to do the other trim on the sides here, I'm going to take a very fine piece of sandpaper and I'm going to lightly go over everything, just kind of dull up the text. Even though it's a matte finish, I still think it's a little too bright for me. So I'm just going to real gently just go over everything and just kind of give it that aged look. I decided that I'm not going to put edges on this side. I think it looks cute the way it is. But I glued the bottom and top piece on, but it's not very secure. So I want to nail it in with my pin nailer. But the problem is I don't have anything that goes all the way through. So I'm going to nail it in from the back. And I've got one of these here, electric DeWalt tackers. This does nails and staples. And when you use something like this, it's best to try it out on a scrap piece of wood before you ruin your project, just to make sure everything's going to go in all right, and then we're good to go. Hold down tight. There. Just going to put 3 or 4 down through there, and then we should be good. Here it is, folks, all done. For once, I did something and I like the way it turned out. I think it turned out really cute. This could be for a boy or a girl. They don't know what they're having. They're gonna wait. So I just think that turned out so adorable. I'm so happy with it, and I hope they love it.